Hello from Osjusti Press. I am very excited to share with you our latest release. This book is personally very significant for me. It was, well, I'll just tell you what it is right off the bat. It's called The Triumph of Romanticism by Father Gerard Steckler. And the reason it's personally significant to me is that Father Steckler was my spiritual director when I was at Thomas Aquinas College for 3 years, 1990 to 93. He left in 93, I finished in 94. But he was a well-loved chaplain, and he and I ended up carrying on a long correspondence. I have a big stack of letters from him. He used to write his letters. He used to type them out on an old typewriter and then correct them by hand. Wild corrections and misspellings and notes and so forth, really amusing and entertaining. But Father Steckler was, as Jesuits often are, a highly educated, erudite man with quite a wry sense of humor and a wonderful way of turning phrases. That came out especially in his homilies at daily Mass. In any case, Father Steckler handed me a manuscript, an unpublished manuscript called The Triumph of Romanticism. This is a very ambitious work. There's a promo video about this that my son Julian and I worked on. You can watch that separately. It goes more into what the book is about. But I'll just give you a sense of what it covers. It basically is a history of Romanticism as a reaction to rationalism, and then all of the vociferousness, I love that word, all of the splitting apart of Romanticism into different sorts of ideologies and movements, political, artistic, cultural. He talks about impressionists and symbolists and expressionists. He talks about, communists and socialists and fascists and liberal Democrats, all of these sorts of movements. He talks about, scientific positivism and the death of that. And so it's a very wide-ranging intellectual history with entertaining vignettes about all these different thinkers. Let me just give you a few samples from this book. I picked them out just to give you a taste of it. Here's page 9. The November Revolution in 1917 was the overwhelming event as Tsarist Russia became the communist USSR. Lenin was arguably the most significant political figure since Charlemagne. For all that, the Russians remained the same, manipulators of men, expansionists, Janus-faced, that is, too skeptical, the result of an exaggerated rationality, and too mystical, the fruit of an exaggerated revelation that they were divine. My word, how relevant that is. This was written quite a long time ago. I'll just tell you briefly, I received this manuscript. Father Steckler never published it himself. He died, but there was a letter he wrote to me in which he said, please do what you can to publish this. And for years and years, I've been wanting to do something with this manuscript. I never made the time for it. I never found the time for it. And once I established Osjusti Press, I realized, aha, this is the moment, this is the time to do it. So the manuscript was copy edited, proofread, typeset, and now it's finally available after so many years. It hasn't lost its freshness. That little passage that I read to you could have been written yesterday. Here's another passage to give you a sense of his wonderful prose style. Talking about Darwin. He has a whole wonderful chapter on Darwin. The praise frequently uttered of the origin of species as a model of scientific prose or a masterpiece of English literature is an opinion that arises from not having read the work, or, despite having read the work, from revelation by faith. Natural selection from accidental variations, which leads to new species, was a pseudo-reasoning interpreted in turn by minds consonant with the age as progress without purpose. The optimism of the age fitted in well with such a meaning. Not much extrapolation was required to form an ideology called Darwinism, the belief that if no purpose and design reigned in the universe, neither were there any fixed moral values. All kinds of conveniences and terrors have flowed from this. The 17th century scientific revolution may have dethroned man from the center of the universe, but at least, exulted Blaise Pascal, the thinking reed that was man had discovered that. Darwin metamorphosed man from a thinking reed to an unthinking product of random variations. Arthur de Gobineau had said, "Man may not have descended from the apes, but he is rapidly getting there." That's on page 71. And then talking about Karl Marx, the elements that went into the making of Karl Marx indicate that he possessed neither originality nor truth. To say that he was a great thinker serves only to condemn the one who would make such a judgment. Marx drew on ancient and current errors to produce a philosophy that merits the title of philosophy only because the modern world uses terms in nominalistic fashion. Skipping a bit. Doubtless, dialectical materialism was the unique contribution of Karl Marx to the potpourri of ideas he tried to plaster together. The physical was the metaphysical, and it was deterministic. Why it was deterministic, he did not need to answer, for what he said had to be true. He attempted to reconcile positivistic determinism and the free activity of insightful men like himself by saying that the sharp-witted could know which way history was going, and indeed sometimes had to give it a helping hand. Here certainly was a clever combination of activism and determinism. From the early Communist Manifesto, he argued the position for voluntary variation within the overall determined pattern, as intellectuals, for example, break away from the dominant ruling class to lead the next class in its rise to historical consciousness. When he said, "Force is the midwife of progress," he resembled no one more than his teacher Hegel, who had urged historians to direct their efforts to discern the path in which history was traveling. The historian, Hegel had encouraged, must think through the empirical events to discover their inner logic. What an artful parody this represented of the original Christian faith that divine providence directed all. Christians did not know what God had in mind, but Marx knew what predetermined road matter was taking. J.H. Randall Jr. has written, "Marxism is the last of the great romantic faiths lingering on in a scientific world." We seem to have swung full circle in reassessing Marxism as Romanticism, but such a judgment emphasizes the blind faith element in that ideology and is accordingly defensible. Marx, the caricature of an Old Testament prophet, thundered maledictions against all but the lowest class, which, in another frightful aping of Christianity, he saw as the poor who would inherit the face of the earth. Far from being a scientist, which he was not at all, he blended an unrooted faith, in this he was a romantic, and empirical reason, in this he was an inadequate rationalist of the Enlightenment, and so produced the religion that commands the obeisance, if not the assent, of 3/5 of the world. Marx produced a surrogate for fideistic faith rather than for religion. For religion belongs to the very nature of man, a fact Marx denied. His faith approximated that of liberal Protestantism, to which he now gave a logical denouement. So, just one more example. I just find his writing so delightful and yes, provocative, but in the best sense of the term. This is towards the end, actually, page 301. What shall we say, finally, of the strenuous efforts of Jacques Maritain, decade upon decade, to reconcile the Church and the world? In 1926, when the Vatican condemned the monarchist right-wing Charles Maurras in his Action Française, Maritain abandoned him and henceforth tried to ingratiate himself with the left. With scalpel-sharp reasoning, he disposed of idiosophy from Descartes to Husserl. He diagnosed brilliantly the leftist sickness: trust in speculation, contempt for being, refusal to begin with matter, preferring what is not to what is. For all that, in his cultural applications of his philosophic reasoning, a kind of democratic urge prompted him to be on both sides of every issue. Although he granted that the ultimate end of the Christian is not of this world, he is responsible, if any man is, for the current idea that the mission of the church is the temporal transformation of the developing world. Human rights, hence his insight that modern times have added to a basic understanding of liberty, well-being for the individual, a supranational organization for the peace of mankind. John the 23rd, who wrote encyclicals to all men of goodwill, and Paul VI, who spoke of homo integer, were very much influenced by him and other French humanistic sorts. Maritain really believed in democratic pluralism on the ground that mankind had been radically transformed at last. He admired the Second Vatican Council for the new age of progress in evangelical awareness and an immeasurable significant renewal, though he lived long enough to see his expectations completely frustrated. He said, "We have definitely emerged from the sacral age," intending by this the Baroque period, and he found that somehow laudable. In his 1958 Reflections on America, he expressed the belief that in the United States, the starting ground for a new Christian civilization, everything points to a fraternal society. The healthy mixture of capitalism and socialism, the amicable competition of ideologies, the mutual jealousies preventing any one group from acquiring a monopoly, and the working class securely church-going. Maritain's thinking therefore rested on a sort of Catholic Hegelianism, whereby God seemed to be continually manifesting himself in material improvements. Subtle in philosophy, he drew all the wrong conclusions in the practical order, as indeed both Popes John the 23rd and Paul VI have done. Modern intellectuals have stolen their optimistic ideas from Christianity, but they despise Christianity or reject the traditional conception of it. Far more honest and frightening have been the prognoses formulated by Romano Guardini and Georges Bernanos, who urge Christians to become totally God-centered in order to support each other in a world gone berserk and proportionately dangerous. So those are just some excerpts from this marvelous book by Father Gerard Steckler, The Triumph of Romanticism, published at last after waiting in manuscript form for many years, now by Os Justi Press in the Studies in Catholic Tradition series, of which it is number 5. This is already getting too long, so I won't say any more. You know where to go, osjustipress.com. You can also watch, as I mentioned, the promo video, which is rather thrilling, if I may say so. Yes, that is sufficient for today. It's available in both paperback and hardcover. Which way does this camera go? I always get there's the hardcover, and and also this video is not, the color is not quite right, so things are kind of monochrome. It's a much brighter cover in person. Thank you for watching, and God bless.